Welcome to the show, Michael.
Thanks, Luke. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, I'm really glad that we connected recently. I think most people know what you accomplished on the field playing over a decade in the big leagues, but you're also still very involved within baseball, helping run the Georgia Roadrunners, which is a travel ball team. Why don't you just high level share with everyone what you're up to right now?
All right. So, still trying to figure out what I want to do when I grow up. No, I keep gravitating toward baseball, whether it's professional or amateur, or helping college players out. It's just something that I can't get away from, even if I tried. But I did some stuff with MLB, the draft combine, led the catchers a couple years ago. Had some other things come up last year. Wasn't able to do that, but just trying to stay in it as much as I can. As far as the amateur side, I've had a baseball business since 2006 called Barrett Baseball. And I got the inspiration from that from Cal Ripken Jr. I used to work for Ripken Baseball, and they did some stuff, some tournaments and some baseball camps as a player. And then when I retired, I wanted to do that full time. So for 2 years, coached the Georgia Roadrunner teams. And then we started up Barrett baseball teams at the same time. And then we also ran the indoor facility, which was individual instruction and baseball individual and softball instruction. And it was fun getting to meet a lot of families, being involved in the community. And then I thought about, maybe coaching in college, went on to University of North Georgia to be a volunteer assistant. And then 2 or 3 months in, got an opportunity and an offer to go manage with the Washington Nationals minor league system. And then went on to, become the catching coordinator later on. But decided to hang it up a few years ago to be at home with my family now. And since then, the baseball business has kind of taken over more than anything. And the Georgia Roadrunners, an organization that's been around since the 70s, was given to me. So I have that now, and that's been going really well. I've added a business partner to help me, try to create more of an income out of it. But, it's a learning experience.
Yeah. Well, the reason why I'm excited to have you on is we're trying to show guys all the different paths that they can go down. And like you mentioned, you stayed involved within the game, specifically with an MLB organization. But we all know that it's very difficult to be involved with an affiliated club at any level and have a family. So after playing as long as you did, I'm sure that was difficult, and why you've kind of gone in the direction that you have. So for guys that want to be involved within the game still, but not have their life consumed being on the road, not being around their family, I think what we're going to talk about today will give great insight to that. But let's just go back and talk about your playing career. You're drafted out of high school, first round pick, made it to the big leagues by 21. We've got so many different guys that listen to this podcast, some still playing, some that are on the other side. Let's just maybe talk to the audience that's still playing, whether they're in college or in the minor leagues, trying to get to that highest level and get the shot at the bigs. What's the biggest thing that you would give from your experience, advice-wise, on that persistence that it takes to get to the highest level?
I think the message that, number one, I think the number one message that I always relay to the boys that I was working with professionally in the minor leagues, biggest thing is continuing to believe. The greatest athlete of all time, greatest quote was, saying it is believing it, believing is achieving it. So I tell the boys in the minor leagues, listen, you gotta tell yourself every day that you're a big leaguer, because the game will just eat you apart. As you know, and I'm sure the listeners know, everybody wants to tell you what you can't do, what you need to do better. But what did you do to get there? You got to remember your why factor, why you started playing baseball from the beginning. Those were the two messages I think that I relayed to the players that I worked with the most toward the end of my time. And what I learned was you know, it wasn't so much that I was trying to motivate guys as much as I was just trying to get them back on track and just being themselves and being disciplined again. Because, baseball will just eat away at you like that. Life will too, a lot of the guys, the other message that I would constantly give the minor league guys is that, as far as the minor league system, it's an illusion. As far as the way we want to make it is a timeline. We want to make it a ladder to success. We want to make it a belt system. It doesn't work that way. When you're ready, you're ready. When you are ready to play in the big leagues, you will get a call, and until that call comes, you're preparing yourself to play in the big leagues on every single level, and the other thing is a part of that was, I felt like in my first couple of years there with the Nationals, I felt like we were successful. I felt like I was successful in helping those guys. But I learned to kind of take it to another level by telling the boys that, hey, we're not just trying to be big leaguers. We're trying to be World Series championship, caliber players. And that's an even higher level. So we're going to train for that. We're going to focus on the detail. I always told the boys the devil's in the detail. What does that mean? When we went on to win a World Series, I even learned a little bit more what that meant. So we kicked it in hyperdrive even more after that, so that's a lot of work. And I don't know if any catcher that gets called up to the big leagues is ever fully prepared for that, much less, some of the other guys as well, not being position specific, but I don't know how you fully prepare for that stage until you get there, because you don't have 80 cameras on you every game. You don't have hundreds of thousands of fans watching you across the country,
That's a great point. And, that is interesting to hit on. Being a catcher, you're involved with every pitch. If you're playing left field, sure, you're going to have some balls hit to you, but the attention is not necessarily on you every pitch. You were in the big leagues at 21 and really started to establish yourself that following year at 22, 1999, when you were the everyday catcher from what it appears at that point in time. Let's talk to guys that maybe are heading to spring training that are going to make the big league club here in a few months. What's the biggest piece of advice that you'd share when you do get there and you are a younger guy? How did you go about doing what you did, having an inherent leadership position, being a catcher?
Yeah, Harvey Dorfman, who was an unbelievable man. He wrote the mental game of baseball, and I had the privilege to work with him for 9 years. And he used to tell me and remind me all the time that your behavior is your reward. Your behavior is your reward. And what that meant to me is a little different than what it might mean to a lot of other guys. But I think young players get to the big leagues, they're getting paid a lot of money. There's a lot of temptations. There's a lot of complacency. There's a lot of things that can interfere with having a long career. And, Harvey used to remind me all the time, you got to be mindful of your behavior because, there's consequences for good behavior and bad behavior. And you have to, learn to separate that from the game. And it's not easy for young players. When everything's given to you, when you get to the big leagues and you fulfill that dream and how good that feels, and then the money and then the other temptations that come with all of that, it can go to some people's heads, for the worse, some for the good, some for the worse.
Well, that's a good point, because it's easy to think that, like you were saying, the difference between like getting to the big leagues and saying the end goal is winning a World Series. Making it to the big leagues is not the goal of any individual player. It's having a career and establishing yourself so that you actually can look back and say, hey, I had a career as a baseball player, not, hey, I made it to the big leagues and was a flash in the pan. I would argue catching is the hardest position in the game. I mean, the physical grind that it is, like I said, the leadership that's required, you're involved in every pitch. You did establish yourself over a whole decade plus at the highest level. You know, what's the what's the mindset that you developed that allowed you to not just say, okay, I made it, and like you said, plateau or make stupid decisions that sees your career go. I mean, you obviously had the raw potential, but you can make poor decisions off the field that can totally derail your career. How did you establish yourself as a big leaguer and develop the career that you did?
Yeah, I mean, number one, it's as a player, as a person, I think I had some good mentors along the way. It wasn't about just being a better baseball player; it was about being a better person as well. That helped me stay out of trouble. I wasn't always perfect, made some mistakes myself along the way. I'd be lying if I said I didn't, but it's what I learned from making those mistakes. The mistakes I made, it was learning from them and not repeating them. It was understanding. And another thing that Harvey used to tell me all the time, it's understandable but unacceptable. Learning to understand that the mistakes that you make are a part of life and a part of the game, a part of what goes on around the game, but we don't accept that. You just have to work on yourself. You just consistently working on yourself on and off the field. And I think most players, when they get that taste of what it means to be successful in the big leagues, is what really helps a player, keep their nose clean more than anything, really. I mean, I think players that struggle are the ones that tend to, look for, answers to their problems outside the field, and sometimes run into problems and have a very difficult time recovering. And when you get that success and you see that, hey, I can have a successful career, there is a chance I'm going to continue on and play in the big leagues for quite a while. Then you realize how important it is to keep your nose clean even more, especially when, you're going out to eat and somebody recognizes you and comes over and asks you for an autograph, or a kid sees you on the street, asks you for your autograph. Now, all of a sudden, the responsibility of staying, clean and being a responsible citizen is important. The times where I probably wasn't was when I struggled the most. If I went 0 for 20, I didn't want to be seen out in public. I'd be hiding in the shadows. But
that is the hard part of the game. Obviously, it's not. I mean, baseball is such a game of failure, and you got to go out there every day. It's not like football where you can kind of hide for a week.
Yeah, exactly. I would just say that in 2000, opening day, I had a very bad game, and it was tough. And we had, like, in Montreal, opening days were huge. They were like World Series. We had 52,000 people there. I made 2 errors that cost us the game, and I couldn't sleep that night. And the next morning, I went to eat breakfast with Ron McClain, our trainer, and I was sitting at the table, and the waitress comes over and says, can I take your order? And I was like, yeah, I'll have the French toast with strawberries, and I'll have a cheese omelet. She goes, wow, you're hungry. And I was like, yeah, I'm starving. She goes, you must have had a bad night last night. I said, I did. She goes, I know, I was there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's like things like that happen. And it humbles you quickly when you realize people that you'll be interacting with are watching. In the minor leagues, you don't have that interaction, but it happens in the major leagues. So
yeah, the spotlight is definitely on you. And I think with how technology has evolved, it's only gotten more magnified because it's not just Sports Center. Now you've got social media, and being a fan is easy. It requires zero work. The only cost is the cost of admission. And that is the difference between a fan and obviously an elite athlete, is all of the work that's put in. And it's not just the grind of the game, but it's the psychological aspect of the game will present failure, but it's also dealing with the media and fans and things that are thrown your way that you wouldn't voluntarily sign up for, but it's just part of the game itself. So that's a very interesting story that you just shared.
Yeah, it's just the way travel breaks you down. It's the grind, and a lot of people ask me, did you enjoy playing baseball? Did you have fun? And that's like, I know this is hard to understand, but it's a job, and you go to work, and it's fun compared to probably most jobs I could have had for a long period of time. But really at the end of the day, getting up and going to work, and there's days where it's really tough, where you don't want to go to work, and people think you're crazy when you say that. But as a baseball player, everyone knows there's days where you don't want to go to work. It's just, it beats on you that bad. I remember this in 2002, the Expos, we started out pretty hot. And no, it was 2000 and might have been 2003, I believe. But anyway, we were playing half our home games in Puerto Rico. So at the beginning of the season, we couldn't get an apartment in Montreal or in Puerto Rico because we were only going to be there half the season. So we traveled to Montreal to play a handful of home games, traveled to Puerto Rico to play a handful of home games, traveled to Florida, traveled all the way to Seattle after that for interleague play. We come back to the East Coast, and I think it was like 27,000 miles we traveled in like 12 to 16 days, right? And so, you want to talk about jet lag, time change. Those are just two small examples of what a player goes through, at that level, that just sort of wears you down, and then mentally you're learning to how to overcome all of those little things to be successful on the field. Veteran players, learn how to little tricks of the trade, and not always are veteran players generous enough to share that information, with young players. Now, I was a little different because we were a young team when I got called up. We didn't have a lot of veterans, but when I got older and realized that, hey, I have another role on this team besides catching, it's to help other young players on the team so we could be successful, win a championship. And so, it was always about, how to take care of yourself, make sure you eat, make sure you're, when that time change comes, how do you overcome that? Taking time on the plane to like absorb some rest, support it, to recharge. We get on those planes. It's exciting sometimes, we're excited where we're going, but it's all those kind of things.
Well, I think that's helpful because some guys it's easy to chase the dream, but then you can eventually you realize that dream, and you realize it isn't just all sunshine and rainbows every day in the big leagues. Like, it is a grind. It is a job. And there's a lot more eyeballs on you, and the mistakes that you make at the big league level versus the minor league level get magnified thousands of times over.
Yeah, I would tell you, like, when I was with the Washington Nationals organization, every player's dream of playing the big leagues is different, right? I mean, everybody that I've ever talked to that had the dreams of, hitting a home run in a big game, but in reality, the way the game has changed, we're working with players that are from all over the world, that they have a different dream, and so I never really pitched the dream as far as selling it, but I know there's a lot of players that I managed that didn't have that dream. Their dream was different. Their dream may have been to just make it to the United States. That was making it to the big leagues for them. Just getting the opportunity to step foot on U.S. soil. And the players that are born in the USA, a lot of times we take those things for granted. But there were players that step foot in Florida for the first time feeling like they have arrived, and then you have to break it down for them and tell them, like, hey, look, there's so much more. There's so much more that you don't know about. And you're selling a different path, a different dream to these kids. And it's not the dream that I had, right? But somehow you got to find a way to refocus on a new set of goals, because they have a lot of the guys I had this conversation with had the talent, had the ability, to go to the big leagues and play at the big leagues for a long time, but that's a little off that topic. But yeah, you're chasing a dream, and once you get to the big leagues, yeah, you fulfilled that mission and that dream, but it's still ongoing. It's a still ongoing process, because when I got sent down to the minor leagues in 2000, that was a nightmare. That was a nightmare, and I was devastated. And getting back to the big leagues was not as hard as I thought it was going to be. I mean, it was more difficult than I ever thought it was going to be.
Would you say that was, it's easy to say, yeah, if we just pulled up a bunch of numbers and looked at it, it's like, oh, wow, like Michael had a really great career, longevity, all those things. What was the hardest thing that you had to overcome? Was it 2000 having to go down and then make it back up, or was it something else along the way?
Yeah, the hardest thing for me was early in my career was bouncing back and forth between third base and catching, not knowing if I was going to be in the lineup, to wondering when I was in the lineup if I was going to be catching or playing third base. Some would argue that being a utility player is no different, but catching and the responsibility of catching and calling the game and being prepared for all those things. And if somebody got hurt behind the plate, going from third to catching, it was nerve-wracking. That was the hardest thing. And then, when you struggle at third base offensively, I didn't realize the pressure that guys that play on the corners have on them to hit until I actually was named the third baseman in 2000. So when they named me third baseman, I'm looking at Chipper Jones and all these great players, Hall of Famers, Scotty Rowland across the field, and trying to produce like those guys instead of just being me, and I struggled immensely, by a month into the season, I had one homer. And I think, even Robin Ventura at third base on the Mets, I think the average was like 10 home runs by mid-May at least, and I'm sitting on one, like I'm going to get sent down or they're going to move me back behind the plate. And that mentally was a little bit of a grind, but eventually got sent down to the minor leagues and then told that I was going to focus on catching only from that point on.
That is an interesting perspective, because obviously catching, there's a lot more grace on the offensive side of the game if you can handle the defensive side. But that must have been a very unique challenge to have to face. Like, you get to the big leagues, but you don't really have a space where you can call home and really pour all your attention into. So,
yeah, when good players, the Trouts of the world, you think of the elite major league players, future Hall of Famers or Hall of Famers, in their darkest struggles, they still did something that other players couldn't, whether it was a defensive, like you look at Vladimir Guerrero's arm out of right field, the great plays he made, the great throws. He was invaluable defensively, even when he wasn't hitting, stuff like that. They bring more than, a batting average to the table. Maybe it's the leadership skills that they possess, little things like that. And over time, I learned to implement a little bit of that into my game. Maybe it's, for when you're struggling, because when you're struggling is when everybody's watching. When you're going good, I used to tell young players all the time, it's perform or conform. If you're not performing, you better be on your best behavior and you better be like doing everything by the book, and you better be doing everything they're asking you to do. Otherwise, they're going to ship you out, So that was a little message I sent to the young players that I was around.
well, let's, I think it's interesting how you've been able to stay involved with the game. Obviously, a lot of things have changed. I mean, if you just look at the economics of the game, it's crazy to see some of the contracts that are getting signed today versus 10, 20 years ago. But also, just at a young age, the game there's a lot more, kids are being put under more pressure at an earlier age. I'm curious to hear from the amateur side of things how you are choosing to go at this, having played at the highest level, knowing what it actually takes, the journey. I see some things on social media. I don't understand why certain things are being taught or valued. And it looks like the actual mechanics of the game are getting tossed out the window to vanity metrics like exit velocity or how hard you can throw it across the diamond. It doesn't matter if your swing looks terrible doing it and you're swinging out of your shoes, or you're taking 5 steps from shortstop to throw it across the diamond. Like, I don't get that, but I'm just curious for you, how are you sorting through, all this stuff and everyone having an opinion and saying, okay, this is how I did it. This is how I saw some of the best guys ever play do it. And I don't care that it's 2023, like the basics of baseball are still the basics of baseball.
Yeah. The thing that I learned more as a coach with the Nationals than I ever did as a player. I was surrounded by great men with tons of experience in developing players. And I think what I found was they used to say there's more ways to skin a cat. I still don't even know if I know what that means, but there's no one way of doing something, right? I always tell people all the time that, like, I don't put anything past a kid that loves the game. I like to give them, the freedom to exercise their creative intelligence, and if they love the game, they'll figure it out to a certain extent, guide them a little bit, maybe reel them in, maybe give them a couple of pointers. But at the end of the day, like, for me, it's a sport, and being an athlete's important. And I think that with some of the things that we're seeing that's trending, I think it robs some of the players from their athleticism and their natural, given ability, in addition to what they may do a little different that makes them successful. I believe that, and I've said this as a player, or no, I'm sorry, I said this as a coach to the players when I was with the Nationals. The players that were struggling offensively, they have to work backwards to go forward. Meaning, like, a 2-strike approach is not something that you would generally, like, rush into. That's something you're teaching the swing, and then you talk about the 2-strike approach. But my thing is that now with analytics, you don't know what pitch is coming at any given count. There's no such thing as a fastball count in analytics. It's a count where, yes, most hitters look fastball, and that only makes them more susceptible to off-speed pitches. And if the pitcher can execute that, they're going to throw it. And if they don't, analytics is going to get mad at them. But as a hitter, I saw a lot of guys struggle with that and understanding that. But when you have 2 strikes, you're up there. You look fastball, but you're ready to adjust to anything. And that's almost the mentality that you have to have in every count, every pitch. And that's not easy to do. My heart goes out to the hitters, but use the whole field. When you have 2 strikes, use the whole field. These all sound like novel ideas and logical approaches, but it's really difficult for hitters to gain the concept of, how to hit with 2 strikes. Nobody wants to hit with 2 strikes. So why would they work on it on the side? But using the whole field, I always said and thought and believed, especially with the shifts, now that they're going to, police that a little bit more with the shifts, how many hits are over on the opposite side of the field, and the pitchers don't pitch into the shifts. The analytics doesn't believe that, you play a guy to pull, you pitch him to pull, you pitch him the same way you would anytime, So, I mean, there's hits all over that field. Just depends on how you look at it. But I certainly understand the analytics side of things, and certainly appreciate the information. But as a player, you don't have to sell out to that. You take a risk when you don't. You take a risk that if you're not successful doing it their way, that they're going to send you down or you get released. You have that in the back of your mind. But at the end of the day, you got to know what you got to do that day to be successful. You're given a path to how to put the numbers up that's going to help that organization win a World Series. That's launch angle. That's what they believe is going to help them win a World Series, is guys with launch angles. But if you're not getting to the big leagues trying to do it, what does it matter? You know what I'm saying? Like, you got to do whatever it takes to be successful that day. nobody in the front office at the big league level is looking down going, well, he was 0 for 4 today with 4 strikeouts because he's been working on his launch angle. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's true. He's hitting 180 because they're analytics. They're analytical. They're looking at your numbers. So you gotta learn to kind of, do a little bit of both. What I got to do to be successful right here, right now. And that's a lot of times just be you, because you got there doing it a certain way. But, we want to, players get, and even myself, we want to get in a hurry to get there or to do what it is. We're naturally pleasers, because we want to play, but, the way I look at it, the way I talk to the kids about it is, sure, yes, launch angle's great. All that stuff's great. But is it going to help you be successful today? I mean, in the minor leagues, you don't even know a lot of times who's pitching against you. How do you know you're going to be able to implement this new swing against the guy that you're facing tonight that you don't even know his name yet? You haven't seen any film of the guy. What if he doesn't have a pitch that allows you to implement a new swing? And you go 0 for 4. Who is that on at the end of the day? Players want to blame it on the coaches or the analytics and the reason why they change their swing. But at the end of the day, you're the one with the bat.
I think that's really helpful to hear, for anyone who's playing, navigating the how do I survive today, but still ultimately get to where the organization wants me to be. You gotta take ownership is really what you're saying at the end of the day. Your results are black and white. You produce. Yep. I mean, that's the beauty of sports. It's a production-based business, like in sales and business. It's really easy to have it be black and white. Numbers are numbers and numbers don't lie. They either are where they're supposed to be or where they're not. Yeah.
And I think a lot of players, especially young players in the minor leagues, they don't know what their numbers should be. They don't know, they haven't had the experience of hitting 20 to 25 homers. They may have a scout tell them you're going to be a guy that hits in the big leagues, hits 20, 25 homers. You probably hit around 250 in the big leagues. Those are all projected stats. Until you do it in the minor leagues, you don't understand how you can do it in the big leagues, But the simple fact of the matter is that you got to get on base and score runs. You want to make it to the big leagues, get on base, score runs, because you have to score more runs than the other team to win, and that's what they want. They want to win. So do whatever you got to do to get on base to score runs. And doubles and triples are great because you're one base closer to scoring. I get all those things you're saying. But if the pitcher on the mound that day is not giving you anything to hit and you have to take your hit to the opposite field for a single, it doesn't mean you're hitting for a batting average, but you're doing what you have to do to get on base to score runs to help your team. What Major League Baseball is doing with even with the bases, trying to encourage and promote, more, I forget how they put it, action. We're going to put bigger bases, make it easier. We're going to change this, so there's more action. Well, with all the things that they're doing, there's nothing that's limiting players but themselves from being able to be more successful on the bases. As an example, take your walks, but that's the thing. Like we as players, and we get away from that because we're naturally trying to please people to get to where we want to go. And at some point, I tell young players all the time, there's a good stubborn and a bad stubborn. The good stubborn is being true to yourself and how you got there, and really knowing deep down that you can be successful. You know what you have to do. It's just whether or not you just have that little stubbornness in you to go out and do it that day.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that I think about is I'm just hearing what you're saying is, I don't care what level it is. One really good day or one really bad day will not make or break your career. You're going to have to stack a lot of good days. They don't have to be consecutive. That's just the reality of baseball, but that's what it's going to take. And you got to figure out how to do that, whatever that looks like. It might not look like the guy hitting above or below you to get to ultimately the same spot, making it to the big leagues and then establishing yourself. But it is definitely a game of adjustments. And that's been consistent no matter whether it's today or 100 years ago. It's interesting to see some of the dynamics of the actual game itself adjusting, but I guess, you can complain about it or do something to figure it out.
Yeah, it's like sometimes you got to slow it down. The game speeds up on you. If you're a pitcher, you accidentally hit a guy, he's on first base. Now the next guy hits a little duck fart over the first baseman's head. Now you have first and second with the 3-hole hitter coming up. And, he hits a single up the middle. Your center fielder throws it away, trying to throw the guy at home plate. Now you got second and third, and everything speeds up, and there wasn't one ball that was hit hard, and then somebody's up in the bullpen getting ready to come in. You know what I'm saying? You're looking over your shoulder. As a hitter, it's like I used to hit eighth a lot with the pitcher hitting behind me. And, if I had a bad game, it'd be easy for me to say, well, I have nobody hitting behind me, but after a while, just based off experience, which this is another thing that I learned. Pete McCannon told me this when I was a rookie. He was like, experience is nothing but a collection of failure, right? So after a while, it's like, okay, this is the deal. Yes, the pitcher's hitting behind me. But do you know how many opportunities until you experience it, you realize that, hey, if you're leading off the inning, they're trying to get you out. They're coming at you. They're not pitching around you at that point. It's unless you hit homers and it's a 1-run ball game, they're going to give you better pitches to hit than anybody in the lineup that day. And you're the 8-hole. They look at you like you're no threat to them. Now with runners in scoring position and a base open in the third inning, and the manager isn't going to pinch hit the pitcher in the third inning, maybe you should be selective. Maybe you take your walk. But, guys don't have to worry about that now, but they know the hot and cold guys in the lineup. But there's always that's the hardest thing about baseball, I think, is the little mind tricks that certain things play on your mind, like during the game. And as hard as you try not to think about it, your brain just goes there. And you're like, crap, why am I even worried about who's behind me?
Yeah, that is true. That is very true.
And the other thing is, I used to tell guys all the time, I'm a catcher. I've caught a ton of games. I've caught a lot of pitches, caught a lot of pitchers. Do you know how many mistakes pitchers make? A lot. And they make the most mistakes with 2 strikes. It's unbelievable. So to never give up.
Yeah, that is an interesting perspective. There's only really the pitcher and the catcher that are as dialed in on what's supposed to happen and what actually happens. I mean, sometimes, obviously, if a ball leaks over the middle of the plate that was supposed to be on either corner, that's obvious to all. But
yeah, I tell people all the time, a Hall of Fame hitter, in the years, Moises Alou to me as a Hall of Fame player. He had some injuries, but that guy never missed a fastball. He never missed a fastball that the pitcher made a mistake on. I never saw him. The year I was with him in Chicago, he hit 300, maybe 40, over 100 ribbies. If a pitcher made a mistake with a fastball, he did not miss. Okay, that's your 300 plus hitter. You're 280, you're above average hitter, slightly above average hitter. The pitcher could not throw the fastball in the same spot twice. Okay, now you're 250 below hitters. They're not gonna. You can't throw them the fastball in the same spot 3 times. They'll get you. You're below 200 hitters. Or when you're struggling as a hitter, you're just missing that fastball and you're wondering why you miss it. I don't know too many guys that I played with. Now I think the game's changed a lot because guys are seeing more off-speed pitches than ever before. But I didn't know too many guys that I played with or against that were good off-speed hitters. You know what I'm saying? Could sit on a breaking ball and when they got it, hit it out of the park. Like the guys that did that, I thought were unbelievable. The examples of those guys would be like Miguel Cabrera, Paul Konerko during my time, Vladimir Guerrero. You know, a lot of times I don't know if they even knew how good they were. You know, they just did what they did and they were successful.
Yeah. Well, as we kind of start to land the plane here, I know as when we talked, you've been in touch with a lot of guys that you played with or against. And I think it's interesting to hear, because baseball, even if you have a long career in the big leagues like yourself, baseball is short relative to life. Life is much, much longer than baseball, and figuring out what you want to do on the other side of the game isn't necessarily the easiest thing, especially when all you've ever known is baseball. But what advice would you give to guys maybe who are on the other side of playing, you know, from your journey? I know you've gotten into coaching, but just figuring out whatever it is that you want to do, what's the thing that you would want to leave in their minds?
I look at it like this, you know, you know, you talk about production. At the end of the day, it's about producing, right? You know, and I always thought of it as a player, like if you can hit, they'll find a spot for you on the field type deal, you know, and every baseball player that's ever, you know, gone to work on hitting, you know how hard you have to work to be successful. And, you know, that's not guaranteed success. You know, you could do everything right in a swing, square up a ball, hit it right to the shortstop, and you're out. But you did everything perfect. Anybody who's played baseball for a long time can understand that, associated with it. You know, you worked 6 days during the week to perfect your swing. You go to work and then you go up there with the perfect swing and you hit a line drive and you're out. And you're like, well, why did I work all that week? You know, why did I do all that work? Why did I make my hands bleed just to hit a line drive right at the shortstop? Right. No, I use that analogy kind of to compare it to the real world when you're done. You know, I went and got my real estate license. I went and got my life insurance license. I look at it like a little different, but at the same time, I'm going to go to work. Just like I'm hitting, I may not get that house. I may not get that listing for $6 million, you know, that day, right? Though I did everything perfect to get to that point. I may not get it, but I know how to deal with it, you know, from my experience playing baseball. So it's not entirely painful. But I think for us as baseball players to be successful is to remember, you know, little things that we learned, some of the difficult things that we dealt with as players, and try to remember how we got through those tough times, you know, to be successful in the business world, you know. And I look at it like this. I was reading something today. One of the coaches I have in the organization was talking about a player that he had that was the starting shortstop, 3-hole hitter, made his college debut yesterday, and he hit a home run in his first at bat. And he said, you know, where did he start? Right field. You know, so I look at positions on the field like career choices that you make, whether it's life insurance or real estate license or running the baseball business or other businesses, like, or becoming an investor. Like, that's playing 9 positions on the field. But at the end of the day, you got to learn to hit, you know, to be successful, right? That's sort of my mentality. And we were talking about that on the phone the other day. I don't want to limit myself in what I can do. You know, now if I get to the point where, you know, I'm killing it in one industry or the other, because I'm still kind of starting out. I'm only in my second year out, you know, then I'll settle into that position. And that would be nice. Everybody loves to play shortstop and hit third. I'm just not there yet. That's the reality from a business standpoint. I'm just not there yet. So I'm going to do a little bit of everything and hope to expand my horizons, get an understanding, a deeper knowledge of all of these different things. And is it hard? Is the real estate business difficult right now? To some it's not. You know, the experienced players, you know, like we talked about earlier, they learn little tricks of the trade. It's no different than any other business out there, you know. But there's so many great people that are in the business world like yourself that are trying to help, that understand that what it was like to be an athlete themselves, to having the opportunity to continue to share those stories that would allow us to be successful on the business side too.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great story that you just used, as far as, yeah, a guy's a shortstop, but he can hit, and that's not an open spot, so he's in right field. The same principles apply to business. You got to just get yourself on the field. If you're at the plate and you're in the dugout after you're at bat, you have a 0% chance of scoring. If you can just get on first, well, you're putting yourself in a position to ultimately try to do what you need to help the team win, which is score a run. So it is a process. It very much is so. And I appreciate your vulnerability and just saying, like, hey, I don't have everything figured out. I'm still figuring out the journey. And that's what I love about this podcast, is to bring guys on and share the real journey. This isn't supposed to be a highlight reel. We're sharing real stories about what guys are going through, what they have gone through, the successes, the failures, all these things, because that's what helped us all play at a high level, whatever that means in baseball. And those things all parallel and can help us in business and life, but we need to know how to actually see the common threads from baseball and bring them into business. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, there's a lot of guys that we have at the Washington Nationals that, I would talk to about, just my thoughts on the timeline. We talked about that a little bit earlier, but, and I don't think it's any different in the business world. You can't put a timeline on success. You'll be successful when you're ready, and I feel like it certainly applies to my life. And then you're going to have setbacks. And it's like the auto accident that I was telling you about that I had in October. You couldn't have predicted that. I couldn't have predicted that. Meaning, and that set me back, just like an injury. I mean, I was injured, but I'm talking about like as a baseball player going to the 60-day disabled list, and now you've got to work to come back. There's so many things as athletes that if we learn to, retrain our thought process to remember back on what we had to do as an athlete to be successful, that's something that a lot of people don't have. They don't have that experience in those high pressured situations. And in some regards, I think it gives us a little bit of a business strategy and a business advantage, to understand that. The other thing is, I look at it like I was reading something the other day about comparing. As players, I mentioned it, comparing myself to Chipper Jones and stuff. I mean, it got me into trouble, right?
Yeah.
I can't sit across, or at my desk at my home looking at the house across the street with a guy who's like really successful and compare myself. He's running a family-owned business, he's very successful. He's been in that business, that industry his whole life. He's killing it. Good for him. I can't compare myself to him. Nor he to me,
Right.
But, the other thing too is I think what changes is, as a baseball player, Luke, not to cut you off, sorry, but I think what changes is, it did change for me. I should speak for myself. But when you're playing baseball, it is about you. You have to make it about you. You have to go to work on you. And when you get married or you have kids and they're healthy distractions, you're blessed to have them. You're blessed to have those, but you get away from you doing what you have to do. I want to give my time. And as these last couple of years, I'm learning how to give my quality time to my kids. But hey, look, today I've got to go to work. Yeah, I was a good baseball player, whatever, but I've got work ahead. And if I don't, it will not be good for anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's that is the interesting dynamic of life, is how do you spin all those plates? You know, being a father, being a husband, doing what you got to do to business wise, make the house run the way that it needs to. I know you shared you have a big family, so there's a lot of financial responsibility that comes with that, and it's not easy. And like the point that you mentioned of your neighbor, that is the difficult thing with baseball, is that it does develop all these intangible skills that very much can be applied in business, but you don't get the benefit of the decades of work that you put into baseball don't then have the same compounding effect in business. You are having to start and develop new skills and new knowledge. And just like you're learning to play baseball as a game as a kid, you're having to do something different, and you're building, it's like a new house, built, laying the foundation, doing those things to have something that's going to be there for a long time and not just crumble. That is the challenge. I mean, whether it's college, minor league, big league career, baseball at a high level demands your full time and attention. So it's not so easy to develop other skills, and it's easy to compare with other people, but there's other people saying, well, I wish that they were you. And the reality is we're all on our own journey, like you said, and success doesn't have a timeline where we need to run our own races.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing for me has been with the baseball business, especially, is, we're competitive by nature. We want to win. We love winning. We understand the importance of winning. But when you're running a business, it's not about winning. It's about, in my business, in my industry, it's about development. It's about getting players better. Winning is out of your control sometimes. We were in a tournament a couple of years ago, came down to a call at the end of the game. Is the reason why we lost the tournament. Same thing as going up there and hitting a line drive to the shortstop. Sometimes things are out of your control. Winning it's not all about winning. I would say that to some people running other sports organizations, and they would think that's the lousiest thing they've ever heard, but not in the industry that I'm in, because, we develop players, we get players better, and unless you're doing that, you're not going to be around long, because I found that, chasing the W is not good. It's not healthy for anybody. And then in addition to that, if winning is all I cared about, how am I going to run the business successfully when my head is out there on the field, trying to do everything I can to get the edge? Well, I need to be focused on, taking care of my coaches so I can continue to keep them around. We've got 6 full-time employees now, six coaches that are full-time salaried employees. If it was all about winning, they wouldn't want to come work for me. They'd be worried that they were going to get fired. That's why the turnover rate, the big leagues, as far as managers goes, is the way it is.
Yeah.
But, you're not going to keep good quality coaches around if the pressure is put on them to win week in, week out. Now they'll go out and win, but that's not the pressure I apply to them. We just get players better.
Yeah. And especially at that age, at the amateur level, the reality is developing baseball players and human beings is what's going to have a lasting impact. No one's going to remember that U12 game and we lost on that Sunday afternoon. That's just one of the many steps on a long journey. So I think what you're sharing is certainly a healthy perspective. And it's sad because sometimes youth sports gets taken over by people that never played at a certain level that they wish they did, and they're trying to live through their own children to achieve something that they didn't. And I like hearing what you're you're doing and the unique perspective that you're bringing, having played at the highest level, not being sucked into the culture.
Yeah, and I learned from failure. I had this conversation with a player not long ago who made it to the big leagues, and I'm super proud of him for doing that. But I remember watching a game in the minor leagues. I was the interim manager, and he makes a couple mistakes, and he's kicking the ball around and kind of showing himself. And after the game, I told him, I was like, "Hey, I'm not going to single you out, but I'm going to use this as an opportunity to teach a life lesson, right?" And so after the game, I said, everybody on the field wants to be the man. You want to be the man. Well, you can't be the man without being a man first. Your behavior today did not justify your existence on this planet as an adult human being, first of all. And I don't even know what that means to be a man. I'd like to believe that. But hey, you behaved very poorly. And it showed. And you'll never get to where you want to go, or you'll never get to be the player that you know you can be by acting like that. So and I find that true in the business world. You stay true to that. Over time, people see that, and they'll trust you, have more faith in you, and more responsibilities given, and more responsibilities given, and the more that you do successfully, the more money you'll make.
I think that's very wise perspective. I mean, the thing that I think about is like that it's easy to get sucked into like wanting to get a result quickly, whether that's on a baseball field or business or life or whatever. But the highest probability of success is not going up to the plate and saying, well, I want to score runs, let's swing for the fences. It's saying, I'm going to focus on doing whatever I can, like we were discussing earlier, to just get on base. And that is that incremental, paralleling it into business or life. Each step around the bases is that increased level of responsibility. And you naturally get the end result that you're looking for when you steward that along the way versus just, doing whatever it takes, even if it's, taking a shortcut on the bases. If you just said, well, it's going to take a lot more time, I'm just going to skip first, I'm going to run over the mound and touch second, third, and home. Obviously, in baseball, no one would do that. There's clear rules, guidelines, but in life or in business, people do maybe try to take shortcuts, and they usually don't pan out. Maybe it takes more time for that to crumble, but it's important to do the right thing no matter whether people are looking or not. And so it's a good example that you use, not to drag someone into the headlines or something and make a spectacle of them, but just a one-on-one teaching moment and use that. So I just appreciate the conversation we've been able to have, for you to be able to share so much wisdom for other guys to learn from. Like you said, it's not so easy. Some guys are not willing to open up and share. You were talking veterans when you're a young guy in baseball. So to just have you share from your experiences, baseball, life, business, anyone that listens to this, I know is going to get a lot out of it.
Well, good. I hope so. Thank you, Luke, for having me.
Absolutely.